My name is Cheryl Mann. I am the president of the National Ski Council Federation, and I want to welcome everyone to this call. We are going to be muting everyone as they come in so that we have Lisa Breggy, who is the past president of the National Ski Council Federation and also the chair of the Education Committee. And her, along with Sara Clemons, president and owner of Sports America, have put together this presentation entitled Trip Leaders, Old and New, How to Set Up for Success. This is a continuation of what some of you guys heard at MTS. And so I'm going to turn this over to Lisa and let her give y'all a couple of ground rules, and then we'll get going.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited. I'm going to spend more time, sorry, Sara, watching who's here and trying to figure out how many people are actually on at the max. We've exceeded my goals already, so thank you all for joining us. We're about 2 years into this education program, and this year we extended beyond the councils and expecting our councils to make invites to their clubs and the club trip leaders. On this particular call, we utilized the MTS database and had told everyone at MTS that we would invite them and get you out there. So a little bit about the Federation. If you are a trip leader from a club that does not belong to a council, we are made up of 29 largest councils in the United States across the whole country. And if you're not involved with a council, please consider doing it. Find out who's near you. And Cheryl or myself are more than happy, or any of our board, to talk to you about that. Sarah, the title of this is, as Cheryl said, Trip Leaders Old and New and How to Set Up for Success. Sara, president of Sports America Tours, has graciously agreed to take this on, and we're going to let her go ahead with that. If you will utilize the chat for any questions you have, she has asked that we address all questions at the end. So put them in the chat and then we will finish that up. Cheryl will be in charge of making sure everybody's mute at all times. And then we really don't want to take up too much time of anyone's evening. So we're shooting for a hard stop at 8:30. So with that, I'm going to shut up. Sara, thank you so much. We appreciate your continued support of the Federation, councils, and clubs throughout the country.
Good evening, everybody. I see lots and lots of familiar faces for all of you that I've met before and worked with before. Thank you so much for participating tonight and sharing with the others in your organization. Hopefully, this will help you guys out a little bit. I know that trip leaders and getting them and retaining them is something that everybody struggles with a little bit. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a PowerPoint for this evening, so you don't have to just stare at my silly face the whole time. We are recording it. We will share the recording and the PowerPoint at the end of this. Probably tomorrow we'll get it sent out to everybody. So we will share that. Okay. Can you all see the PowerPoint? Trip leaders tips for success. Happy? All right. So I'm going to go into two different directions tonight. We are going to do kind of two sides to this. The first side is going to be finding, creating, and retaining trip leaders. What are you and your organizations doing to foster that? And then from there, we're going to transition into the roles and responsibilities of trip leaders and the organization as a whole to create successful trips and trip experiences for all your travelers. So new trip leaders, who are they? Where are they? I'm focusing on 3 different directions to answer that question. One is going to be succession planning. Secondly, it will be fostering a supportive network for your trip leaders, and then rewarding and recognizing them and their successful trips. So with succession planning, basically that, if you're not familiar with that term, that is the concept and the idea that organizations are not just going to foster themselves, that there's transition involved, and you need to get new leadership and new participants as they come in, so that you're refreshing your organization on a tier of levels to be able to maintain strong organizations. So how can you find that, right? Like, the first big question is, where do trip leaders come from? They come from you, veteran trip leaders and officers within the organization, recognizing potential. So most people out there are not overly eager to jump in and take control of the situation and volunteer themselves to do things. It means the officers and the veterans of these organizations need to recognize that potential and need to speak up and tell new members, new participants, what they need, what you want. I want you to help me run the summer picnic. Can you be in charge of advertising for our summer picnic? Start with small roles. It doesn't have to be immediately like, oh, you're fun. You want to take 45 people to Snowmass next winter? That will be awesome. Like, that's never going to happen. And you don't want that to happen, because it has disaster written all over it. So acknowledge potential and foster that. Start small with weekend trips, with local events, with smaller situations for them to get involved with, because that's going to allow you to build relationships with new people, build their confidence in their abilities to be leaders, to be organizers, to foster new friendships and gain a following of other members within your organizations. And it's also going to allow you to see their strengths. Like, every organization needs leadership, and they need volunteers, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a trip leader, but by fostering that relationship and picking out people to give them targeted roles on a smaller level, it's going to let you find out really quickly if that person is going to be great for a trip leader role, or maybe they're going to be way better for like the treasurer role. And every one of your organizations has a lot of shoes that need to be filled. So by starting small and acknowledging potential and asking for help, you're going to figure out what those roles are a lot quicker. Then the next advice I have is to don't just throw them to the wolves at, once they do some local trips, weekend trips. Make sure that you're letting your trip leaders be an assistant trip leader first, even with your big destination trips, and then next level, like international travel. Let them shadow a trip at first. Make sure that they've been on destination trips before you throw them even into a co-trip opportunity. So that kind of transitions us into your support. As organizations, you need to make sure that your trip leaders have support from start to finish during their trip leader experience. So having a mentor available, that doesn't just mean a co-leader or, they're an assistant trip leader and they have the lead trip leader, but have a mentor available, maybe that's not running trips anymore, but is happy to share experiences. Have resources available. I'm hoping that maybe tonight this forum can yield some sharing amongst organizations on trip leader handbooks that maybe already exist. Because let's be real, if you've ran 5, 10, 15, 20 trips, you've got things in your head that you don't even know your new trip leaders don't know, right? And the new trip leaders don't even know they don't know these things. But so much of your knowledge as veteran trip leaders comes from experience and sharing those stories. It's almost like hot tub talk or bar talk, like sharing your experiences. So is there a handbook of the good, the bad, and the ugly that you've experienced as a trip leader? And maybe some of the organizations can share those if they do exist. And if not, work on creating those. Are there other resources available, like budget sheets, email templates? If there's an email that goes out for payment reminders, for final trip communication, for new trip announcements, is there a template that exists that your trip leaders can access so that they're not rewriting the zone every time they go to do a trip. All things to think about from an organizational level to make sure that you're supporting your troop leaders, new and old, from the very beginning. Okay. So then the next aspect of this is making sure that you are providing reward and recognition for the trip leaders once they're involved, because, and this goes beyond monetary perks, like lots and lots of trip leaders do get some component of their trip comped. That's certainly important and certainly nice when that does happen, but it's not always the case. And there's things that you guys can do as organizations to go beyond just a comp trip. You know, simple verbal and written acknowledgement once a trip is done, saying, thank you for the year, the 18 months that you've dedicated to making this a success. You know, getting the travelers on that trip to put a card together as an assistant trip leader. Maybe that can be a role for them to put a thank you card together. So at the end of the trip, you're able to recognize your trip leader for all of their hard work. You know, a nice little keepsake from that destination. Little things make a big difference. And then listening to their ideas and their struggles, like make sure that your trip leaders are heard during and after the events, because if they don't feel heard and recognized, then it's going to be really easy for them to walk away and say, this isn't worth it. This was a lot of work and nobody even recognized like everything that I did to make this a success, or nobody recognized how hard it was when I had to get 36 people from San Francisco to Mammoth and every road was closed and we went to Vegas instead and had to find a new bus. Like crazy things happen, and just recognizing that does happen and hearing trip leaders and their ideas and their struggles for success later is important and can make a difference in retention. Okay, I think that kind of does it. So that's my giant spiel on finding, creating, keeping trip leaders. There's no golden answer, right? Like everybody has to work hard at this, and we all have to come up with creative ideas and make sure that we're being kind and we're being thoughtful and that we're holding each other's hands to continue to grow our organizations. So moving forward from that a little bit, when I was talking with many trip leaders actually about my MTS speech, my morning breakfast, and like talking about topics that are hurdles in the industry and things that we see as tour operators and that my agents that are working with all of you see every year is kind of how I create those topics. And it was interesting in this past year or so, we had a lot of circumstances that we were caught off guard by, with new trip leaders and even not new trip leaders not having the full picture or having expected something from us that we didn't realize was that expectation, or we didn't know they didn't know to send payment reminders or to drop the airspace. And so how to hold hands and make sure that the trip leader responsibilities are known and understood and expectations are set, both from our level as tour operators who are here to hold your hands and create successful trips, but also from an organizational level. Like, what are each of you guys as officers and board members that are working with your trip leaders doing to make sure that your organization and that each trip you run is set up for success? And these responsibilities are going to vary dramatically across all the different organizations. Like, there's no right way to do this. And so as I kind of move forward from here, I want you guys just to think about these different aspects and how your organization addresses these, and maybe if there's room for change, or if there's a place that you could do better, or that you feel like you excel at and you'd like to share with other organizations. So knowing all of that, I find that trip leader responsibilities fall into a whole series of events. So when you put a trip together, it's going to start with trip planning and resort selections. Then you have to figure out your trip budget. What are you going to sell that trip for? What's included in that price? Then you have to market your trip and promote your trip. Then you have to get registration done and collect payments and keep track of who's paid what. Then you have your contractual obligations, and you need to be managing when your airline drop deadlines are, when your lodging drop deadlines are, when payments are due, both when you're collecting them from your members, and then also when your payments are due to your industry partners, the airlines, the tour operators, the lodging managers. And then you have all your responsibilities for travel day, on-site, and post-trip. So I want to kind of break that down a little bit and talk in some categories here. So when it comes to trip planning, I think that one really interesting thing to think about, because I see it done several different ways, is almost a chicken or egg scenario. There are many situations where a trip leader says, they get to make the decision. They say, I want to go to Schweitzer, Idaho. And I've never been there. It's on my bucket list, so that's where we're going. And the trip gets planned with that in mind, and off they go. Then there's the flip side of that coin, almost the exact opposite, where whether it's a board decision or survey results or however the decision is made, the destination is selected, and then a trip leader is assigned to that destination. So the organization says, we're going to Sun Valley. And now we have to find a trip leader to do that. Okay, well, you're next up. It's your turn to be trip leader. So you get to go be the Sun Valley trip leader. Whatever direction your club is going to make this selection, a couple things to think about is that you need to make sure you have the balance, right? Like, it could go dramatically wrong either direction. If you have a trip leader that says, I'm going to this destination, like it or not, that's where we're going next year. If you don't have the following from your club members to want to go to that destination also, your trip's going to flop. It's not going to sell. You have to have the buy-in from your membership. And reversely, if you have a destination that the trip leader got assigned to, and they're not motivated to go there, they're not excited about it, they're not enthusiastic about it, they're not going to do a great job selling it, running it, promoting it, being engaged with it. So make sure whichever direction, or hopefully somewhere in between those two dramatic examples, exists within your organization, make sure you're trying to find that balance, because when it comes down to it, the travelers are what matter, right? Like, you need to be listening to your people first and foremost to make sure that you're finding a good partnership between trip leaders and destinations to have the most success within your organizations. So then the next step of that is going to be, once you have your trip leader and you have your destination, you've got to figure out the budget planning. You have to come up with that price of what you're going to sell that trip at. And in some cases, the trip leader plans the trip, budgets the trip, publishes the trip. It is one person from start to finish. But we see many, many, many times where the trip leader is not even involved in the actual budget of the trip. You know, it's a trip committee or a trip director or a few people within the organization that are coming up with the destinations. They're voting on them, getting them approved. Then they're coming up with the budget. And within that budget, they've got all the magic numbers that say, okay, there's, you know, this is the magic number to earn comps. And the transfer price of $176 is actually based on 32 people paying for that. And a single supplement, we're not only going to charge the pillow price, we're going to charge the pillow price plus the transfer cost to make sure that we have that covered, because the bus is being split by the pillows. And if I sell a pillow without a bus, then we're screwed. You know, we get a free welcome reception as long as we have 30 people show up. But if we don't have 30 people show up, then we don't get that free welcome reception anymore. So there's lots and lots of components that go into what you're selling that trip for. And it boggles my mind how many times the trip leaders don't know those details. They just know the trip price is $2,200. And if you want a single supplement, you're going to pay an extra $14. And if you don't want air, you're going to deduct $550. But they don't know the why for any of those numbers. And so whether the trip leader is actually involved in coming up with those numbers or not, it's very important for them to know that it exists and what those components are that are going to make a difference in your final invoicing. Because if the comps are based on 32 people and now the trip dropped and they only have 28 people and they don't earn their comp, then they come to us and they're like, why the hell don't I get a comp? Okay, well, this is why. And we explain it and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Or the same goes for a transfer cost. Your transfer cost is based on 32 passengers and all of a sudden there's 28 people on the trip and the final bill has, you know, the organization losing $1,200 because they're short on people having paid for bus seats. And it's this big surprise. So just making sure that however your organization comes up with those budgets and all the integral details, that your trip leaders have an understanding of where those variables could be come final invoicing for that trip and where they need to be cognizant of changing in costs because of changing in participant counts. And then the last part of that is going to be understanding the contract language, because in the same respect, there are often times that I find the actual trip leader has never even seen the contract that was issued between us and the organization. You know, they were assigned the trip and they know what to sell it at and they know the details of where you're staying and all the fun, you know, play stuff, but none of the actual details. So understanding and knowing everybody involved to know whose role it is when it comes to when payments are due and when drop dates need to happen, whether that's lodging or airfare. I think the biggest takeaway on this is setting that expectation from the very beginning, because I've learned in the last few years that we have this idea that our trip leader is our go-to. Once we get assigned a trip leader for a trip, that's our go-to person. So my expectation, if we don't have a conversation in the beginning, is that if I give you as a trip leader a reminder that your second payment of $10,000 is due in 2 weeks, that's good enough. We should be getting a check in a couple of weeks for $10,000. But then maybe that's not how your organization works. Maybe we actually need to invoice your treasurer, or maybe your trip leader needed to do a check request to your treasurer, or whatever the expectation is, whatever the role responsibilities are. Make sure that everyone involved, your trip leader, your treasurer, your tour operator, knows what that expectation is. So there's not surprises down the road where people are going, oh, well, I thought you asked for the check. I didn't ask for the check. Did you pay anybody? Did nobody got paid on this? Oops. Okay, let's fix it. So just really making sure that there's communication and everybody knows their role, because there's many different ways that I see that take place. So then pre-trip details. This one's kind of more fun. This, you know, but it's very important. When you talk about marketing and promotion, could be a whole different topic in itself. Like I'm not going to spend tons of time on this, but it is worth mentioning, because a really important job of the trip leader obviously is marketing the trip and finding travelers. So how are you doing that? You know, are you relying solely on your membership base and email newsletters, or do you have trip kickoff parties? Are you reaching out to other local athletic organizations that, you know, you might be able to pick up an extra 4 people from your local pickleball club, or you might be able to set up a booth at your Thanksgiving 5K that runs in town, because those are athletic people that might not even know a ski club exists. So what are you doing to get new travelers and maybe new trip leaders? Registration and payment collection. How are you taking registrations? How are you collecting money? Your tools for success. What are you doing as organizations to make sure that your trip leaders have those tools for success? They have spreadsheets already created, so it's super easy to track payments. You know, they're using an online portal that they have access to track people's trip selections. Are there shared documents? Something very scary lately is learning how many clubs don't have shared documents amongst trip leaders to other members of the board. There might be a master spreadsheet that says, I've got 32 people signed up on this trip as of this day, and 25 of them are taking air and the rest are land only, and one guy is taking a boat from Hawaii. Like whatever the details are, it's documented. But how many cases I find that only the trip leader has that information when we call up the trip leader because it's an airline drop date and we've been sending emails for a couple weeks and not getting answers. And then we start making calls every day going, okay, we've got 2 days until we have to drop air and we're not getting answers. And then reach out to a trip director or somebody else on the board and they go, I can't get a hold of them either. I don't know what the story is. I don't know how many air seats are sold. And then all of a sudden the club's on the hook for 8 extra air seats to the tune of 50 to $100 a pop because there's not a shared document. So if you don't have a shared resource situation set up, reach out to me later and I'm happy to share ideas with you on how to make sure that that does exist for your organization. Another big slip in the gap that I see a lot is payment reminders. You know, depending on who you're working with as a tour operator, there's different resources available for that. But again, communication, whose role is it? Are you sending payment reminders? Are your travelers getting payment reminders to make sure that they are making their payments on time? And if they're not making their payments on time, what's being done about it? So that the club doesn't end up in a situation where somebody made a deposit and then totally goes to the situation and all of a sudden it's final payment and there's nobody to fill that spot. But this guy's in the weeds. Nobody knows where they went or what they're doing. And now you're $1,800 short because the payment wasn't ever collected. So just making sure, again, communication, whose role is it and is it taking place? And so then that communication goes on to the travelers. The final step in the communication in the pre-trip is setting that expectation for your travelers, making sure that your travelers know what to expect when they get to the airport, when they get to the property. Hey guys, unfortunately the hot tub's closed. If you can, you know, manage things like that ahead of time, it's going to set your trip leader and your organization up for much better success on the trip, because there's nothing worse than surprises. Addressing it ahead of time and setting the communication, good, bad, ugly ahead of time is going to benefit you in the end. And just making sure that it happens from the beginning. They signed up for the trip. Was there recognition that you received their registration? You know, intermediary communication. They might sign up for a trip in August and that trip's not taking place till March. Make sure you're connecting with them in between that. And then obviously right before the trip happens, everything that they can expect on the trip, because a lot of people travel with groups because they're intimidated by travel. They don't want to do it by themselves. They don't like the unknown of it. So making sure that you're communicating all the details to make them feel comfortable is going to get them to come travel with you more. Then you have your travel day on-site post-trip. This is, I think, what a lot of people think of when they think of being a trip leader, right? It's like going on the trip. We've talked about all the way more that is involved in being a trip leader, but this is like what people think about, maybe what your traveler thinks about when they say trip leader. It's this, right? Number one thing I could just like pound into everybody's heads is have contact information available and handy and saved for your travel day. That means like a couple days beforehand, when your flight's canceled at 2 a.m., who are you calling? Do you know who you're calling? Like, know that ahead of time and know that from a tour operator perspective, sometimes the person that you've been working with through the duration of your organizing the trip is not necessarily who is the best person to call in that moment. So making sure your trip leader knows, who do I contact 24 hours a day for any moment when I'm traveling in the heat of the moment? Who is that person? Now that person might not necessarily be able to fix it or have the answers for you, but that phone call, that number is going to be more reliable than going, oh my God, my bus isn't here. Why is my bus not here? I'm going to send Katie an email and it's Saturday. She's got to be working. I'm going to send her an email and tell her our bus isn't here. Okay, that's not necessarily true. Your Katie might not necessarily be working that Saturday, but there's certainly people in place that are working. And if you call the right phone number, then that person can say, all right, let me find your bus for you. Or let me go find Katie because that actually is the person you need to talk to. So just making sure you have those numbers, your tour operators, if you're going direct, your lodging partners, your transfer companies, that dispatch phone number, and your travelers. You should have every single person's contact information handy. The number of people that have been like MIA in airports is mind-boggling to me. And the trip leader's like, well, I don't know if that was their home phone number or their cell phone number. Okay, that's important. Make sure that they know that. And that follows through into on-site during your trip. Communication, like I said a few minutes ago, is that lots of people travel with groups because they're not very comfortable traveling by themselves. They want to have that camaraderie. They want somebody holding their hand during that experience. And not everybody, we have a lot of people that are very willing to speak up the second something goes wrong. But there's also a lot of people that are not very comfortable coming forward if they're concerned or questioning something. So making yourself available during the week, whether that's just through a simple check-in, you know, it's Tuesday. I hope everybody's having a great time. Just a reminder, we have an après set up tonight. I'd love to see you all there. Like making yourself as a trip leader available in case there is somebody that is not very comfortable saying something, but you know, really needs to tell you that their condo mate's been naked all week in the living room and they're really terrified about it. Like things happen, and it's important to make sure that you are there as a trip leader to support everybody on your trip. Reminding travelers of departure plans and if departure plans change, you know, not just the fun events that are going on during your week, but making sure there's a check-in during the week that says, okay, just a reminder, our bus is here at this time. We need to be doing this, this, and this. And then post-trip, I mean, I feel like broken record, communication. Surveys, how was the trip? The good, the bad, and the ugly. Make sure you're soliciting everybody's reaction as you go, maybe even on the bus ride back to the airport. Like, don't let them go away without giving you their reaction to the experience. Making sure you're following up and reconciling anything, injuries on the trip, somebody had to leave early, whatever the case is, making sure you're closing out your trip with your travelers and with your industry partners, and building excitement for the future trips. That should be happening. You know, your next trip is before you even get home from that trip. So making sure you're building that excitement, which is going to build your traveler base, which is going to build your organization, and it's a win for everybody. Okay, so did we blow your mind? Is everybody just going, oh golly? So what next, right? Wine, maybe? Maybe just questions and answers. We can jump into that. I will close this share screen and we will hit the chat board. How do I exit? Stop share. All right, chat board. No questions? Do we really not have any questions after all of that? Comments? Anything anybody wants to share about any of the topics that I touched on that you've seen great success in or great struggles in?
Hey, Cheryl, I don't know what, I mean, Sarah, I don't know what happened to the question, but there was one earlier, wanting to know, how to compensate co-chairs or co-trip leader as part A, and then part B responsibilities when it's a council trip, council versus club responsibilities.
Oh, council. So I'll start with the council versus club because I actually meant to make a couple statements in the beginning of this. One of them was that I was speaking, and most of this is generally targeted towards club travel, but obviously within the club travel umbrella, most clubs are still having their little pockets underneath their council organization level. I think really the big distinguishing difference between council and club is just that extra level of communication. And so that extra level of whose role is it, making sure that that's set, you know, from the beginning of whose job is it? Who do you speak to as a trip leader if you need to drop space, if you need to add space, that sort of thing. And then the comp side of things, as far as comps go, I mean, That is really up to all of you guys. I've seen comps happen a lot of different ways. Lots of it is based on getting enough people on the trip, and sometimes that trip, and now more and more when lodging partners and industry partners aren't giving those natural comps, by being able, in order to compensate monetarily your trip leaders and or assistant trip leaders, you're increasing the price of your trip, which isn't even always an option. It's kind of getting rid of some of that value. So that's where some of the more creative things come in. Like, maybe you can't give them a trip comp, but you can comp their family membership for the year, or they get, free admittance to your holiday gala, or like there's things you can do within the organization to still recognize their efforts, and not just a financial way.
All right. Let's see if I can find the next question.
Oh, I found some. Okay, so we had one comment about communication, and this is great too. So GroupMe, there's a lot of different communication options out there that aren't just like group text forums, right? You don't have to actually program everybody's name into your phone. GroupMe is a great app that is available. WhatsApp is another great app. Both of those are very, very, very useful and necessary for international travel. Even we do mostly domestic, but I even had one time somebody got up to Canada, I don't know, 10 years ago. And as a trip leader was like, oh, my phone's not going to work here. You can't call me while I'm here. I'm like, whoa, buddy. No, that's kind of important. Like, you need to have some sort of communication option with your travelers, and even setting up those, whether it's GroupMe or WhatsApp or group message boards, Facebook events, all of those forums, you can set those up weeks, months before the event takes place, and kind of build that trip camaraderie, let everybody get to know each other even ahead of time. It doesn't have to be utilized solely for that event. Can you go over the new airline group deposit changes and drop policies? It is ever changing. So the newest change is pertaining to United. And actually, those of you that were at MTS, it's kind of evolved. We've gotten some more clarity on it since then. So the way the United records work right now is that you get, if I call up United right now and I book 32 seats, I have 7 days until I have to deposit on that record. So I get these 32 seats, I call you up, I give you the quote, you say, yes, let's deposit these 32 seats. So we pay $50 per seat to hold all 32. From that moment, if I call up tomorrow, from that moment, for the next 90 days forward, you could cancel that contract completely for just $150. If you hold on to that record further than 90 days from when you deposit, so between 90 days past depositing until your utilization date, if you cancel that record completely, they double that, and it turns into $300 to drop the entire record instead of only $150. Let me preface all of this with, this is domestic United travel. It's not international. International has different values involved with their deposits and their cancellation fees. So this is domestic United group travel. Once you hit utilization date, it's the same as it's been for years. Utilization is typically 90 days prior to travel. And at that point, you have to ticket 90% of what you're holding. So at 90 days, if you're still holding on to all 32 seats, you can drop 3 of those when you turn in your names and not get charged. If you drop more than 3, they're going to charge you for each seat. That's the big change. Depending on what your familiarity is, Delta is kind of a wonky one with group travel anymore. Delta doesn't let groups book until 240 days prior to travel. So whereas the flights are loaded right now, you can't book group space on it until 240 days before your trip. Once you call them up and ask them for a quote, they're gonna charge you $20 per seat just to give you the contract. That $20 is not applicable to the fare. It is simply a charge for having booked Delta groups. Then within 10 days, you have to deposit $50 per seat that goes towards your ticket. Depending on the contract, there's a lot more fluctuation in their utilization dates and their ticketing dates. So we've seen some Delta utilization dates as early as 120 days prior to travel. We've seen some ticketing dates as early as 90 days prior to travel. That means at 90 days, you're submitting names and locking those in with Delta. So they're pretty strict. Southwest, they changed a couple years ago, and once you've got like a 10-day window to deposit on a group. Once you deposit on that group, you have to utilize 90% of the group, or they will charge you $50 per seat. And if you break utilization, so if we hold that 32 seats like we have been, and you drop 4 seats instead of only 3 seats, then you get charged $50 for all 4 seats, not just for the one you went over. So that's kind of a super broad stroke recap of where we're at with airline terms. Building a second. I'll just read these in case you guys aren't reading them. So it says, I like the idea of building excitement for the next trip. We do surveys, which include asking our group what worked, what didn't, and where do you want the club to go next time? Do you think it is a great, what do you think is a great way to get our members excited for the next adventure? That's more of a comment. I think that's all very valid. Building excitement really just is like camaraderie, right? Like what kind of value are your trips bringing? What destinations haven't you gone to? You know, you got to feed off of the energy from the current trip and get them excited about the next one. Another comment, we do group chat or WhatsApp with one person as the condo captain and a room captain to reduce the size of the group. So that's nice. Instead of having maybe all 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 members on the WhatsApp group, you just have a condo captain. So you almost have like a liaison, and then that condo captain is in charge of communicating to their respective lodging units. That's a great idea. This one says, if it's a bus trip, do you recommend the bus pricing be less than the actual amount of people on the bus? That's going to be very dependent upon your destination and your typical like fulfillment of trips. If you find as an organization that you struggle hitting that minimum, like if you're shooting for 36, but you look at your track record and you're like, okay, so we try for 36, but we usually end up at 32. You know, it's certainly worth saying, all right, let's do our budget based on 32. And if we hit our market 36, that gives you guys play money. You know, it gives you, we kind of call it the oh shit fund, right? Like something else goes wrong and all of a sudden you've got a couple $100 that you have to pay for something, you know, or you need it, somebody's having a miserable time and they've got a roommate that they're not getting along with. And now you've got a couple extra bucks that you can say, you know what, here's a gift certificate, go have dinner. I'm really sorry you're having a hard time here. Like having a little bit of play money, a little bit of extra slush fund is always a good idea. YouTube videos are a good way to share where you're going. Yes, the world we live in now, there's a ton of social media channels. A lot of resorts have some really great social media like Facebook, Instagram marketing teams that share some great photos, some great videos. YouTube channels have some fantastic promo videos that are created by the resorts themselves. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can go out there and poach that. It's all on public domain. So if you take it off of YouTube and share it with your travelers, you're not going to get in trouble for it. Next one. Some accommodations have implemented a 1 club a week limitation post-COVID. Have there been any relaxation of this now that the travel surge is starting to abate? Not really. I think honestly, we've seen more and more properties adopt that protocol that they've realized for a few reasons. One, because of limited inventory, they don't have the inventory available at all that they used to have. Two, the inventory they do have available is limited by some higher ups because of revenue holds, where they're gonna say, no, you don't get to sell the entire property to the discounted group rate. You only get to sell X amount percentage of the property to the discounted group rate. And so even though the leisure market has started to break a little bit, we haven't really seen, certainly no properties that started that, have they relaxed those terms and gone back. There's some that obviously never implemented it, and I don't think ever will, but we have seen even just this season, more properties kind of adopting that scenario. And as hard as it is, and it kind of creates this crazy demand for all of you while you're booking, I really have found that it's actually to your benefit, because the travel experience you're getting, and maybe not for you guys that are working directly with the properties, but even what we've seen, the availability and the responsiveness of our property partners has gotten a lot better. Not if they're not trying to juggle 2 or 3 groups during the same timeline, as it when they're focused on, like, we want this to be special for you. So we're gonna do this one group a week, and you know you have their attention, and you know you're gonna have a quality experience because they're there for you, which that's kind of been, as long as we keep seeing that positive experience, like, I'm not as annoyed at this situation as I was originally, because I think that's actually benefiting you guys to some extent.
Hey, Sarah, I think you might be getting some direct questions because I'm not seeing them in my list.
I think almost all of these are to me. So can
right.
I just keep going down my list?
Sure.
Okay.
Then
So then we had any other ideas on marketing the trips. So we did touch just briefly on some outside the box ideas. I know that, like, clubs membership are generally shrinking. Like, people are having a hard time even getting members involved in the clubs. And so we've tried to get really creative on some ideas on where you can go, what you can do. Rec centers are a great place to, make some quick little flyers, make little 4x6 cards that advertise maybe your club on one side and your trips on the other side, and have that you're looking for athletic places and social places. So those two things are very broad spectrum, right? You've got, like, your rec centers, your pickleball leagues, your softball leagues. Some of those are going to drive in some of those younger members also. Everybody's kind of looking for that magic. How do I get the 30 something, 40 something, 50 somethings instead of just our membership that we have? Reaching out to that athletic adventure clientele is going to be helpful. I mentioned, like, races, events, if there's ski shop sales, if there's running races, bike races, again, athletic situations that are happening in your area. Usually you can buy in to have, like, a pop-up or a table at those type events for a couple $100, I mean, you can spend the same amount on a bunch of flyers that you never know actually even touch anybody's hand. So being able to be out there with your hats, with your shirts, like, just exposure to active younger people is going to, if you get 2 people, you win, right? Trying to think of other, I can't think of other off the top of my head. That's all I got on that one. We got a thank you everyone for doing this. There's been a lot of discussion in our club on when is the right time to start trip planning, and the announcements of the trip and plans to the membership. So when is it too soon or too late? And when do tour operators have enough info to quote a trip? Okay, there's a lot in that. So let's break that down a little bit. I'm going to start at the end. When do the tour operators have enough info to quote a trip? That is drastically dependent upon the destination you're looking at. Unfortunately, we cannot convince every revenue manager in the industry to get on the same timeline. So as much as we try, there are certain properties that they just don't have their act together and aren't even willing to throw a number at you until March, April, May of the year before. Like, think back to old school timeline of MTS. They're stuck in this. I'll have my rates to you by MTS, and it's not happening before then, which is unfortunate, because then you've got the flip side where, you know, we've got people contracted for Snowmass 2026. It's 3 months ago, we started contracting Snowmass 2026. And then obviously everything in between. So that is very, very, very dependent upon the destinations you're looking at. With that, when it comes to when is the right time to start planning, I really encourage you guys, especially if you're planning multiple trips. If you're an organization that's not just running a trip a year, if you're looking at running multiple trips, not to get hung up on creating your entire trip lineup at the same time. Being flexible. If you want certain destinations, you're gonna have to be flexible to either wait it out a little bit or to lock it in really early and then fill in your weeks beyond that, you know, on a less drastic timeline. The pass products have changed this a lot as well. So we've kind of started pushing a new scenario to our clubs, which I think has some structure, like it's got some grip. Passes go on sale. Icon always goes on sale the beginning of March. Epic goes on sale shortly after that. And to get, especially Icon, you've got like a 3-week window to get the best rates on an Icon pass. If you're renewing that Icon pass, that it goes from, you know, best deal to, oh, that's expired, too bad, you missed out very quickly. So if you can spend your fall kind of creating your trip lineup, making your plan. So, I mean, we're talking August, September, October. Once you get past October, your lodging managers, your tour operators, they're so pedal to the metal into operations of the next season. It's going to be really tricky to get quotes put together. So if you have the structure of your trips kind of figured out, September, October, November, then by, you know, you can either announce your destinations on your winter trips. If you've got that January trip, you can do your big trip announcement when you're going home. Be like, did you love this? Guess what? Next year we're going here. And then certainly you don't have to give the details. You don't even have to have the pricing figured out. I know a lot of times you're locking in lodging, but you don't have lift rates yet. You don't have airfare yet for sure. You might or might not have transfer rates. So you really don't even know or have a great idea of what that total trip price is. But we've been encouraging people to create that trip lineup, you know, say, guess what? Trip release announcement, save the date. I have got a couple clubs that send out save the date cards, which is kind of cute, on where their trips and the weeks that their trips are going to be. And they highlight, you know, it's going to be Icon, Icon, Epic, 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 so that people have at least that information to say, okay, I don't even care what the price is. I know I'm going on those 2 Icon trips, so I'm going to lock in my Icon pass right now. And then they have their big trip kickoff meetings on the more traditional timeline of June, July, August is when we see most trips kind of go on sale. The exception of that, not just on a trip planning side, is there's a couple resorts out there that have ungodly deadline dates of like, you have until July 1st to drop your lodging and there's no wiggle room after that. So in the same flexibility that you have to book somewhere like Snowmass, you need that same flexibility of like, maybe we need to break the rules and put this one trip on sale earlier so that we know how many people are getting into it.
Sarah, I think I may be getting some direct messages also.
Okay.
Let me read you a few. Do any other clubs require monthly financials from their trip leaders to see where they are at financially, selling the trip, etc.?
If you don't, you should, or those should be part of the shared documents that we're talking about, so that it's not just the trip leader that has access, so that the officers in your organization have a heads up that are like, oh, hey, all right, this trip leader's done what they need to do. They've collected the money that needs to be collected up until this point. They've paid the money that was supposed to be paid up until this point. It's not that you're trying to be, you know, big brother babysitter. It's just a good idea. You don't know when something's gonna happen to that trip leader and, you're not gonna have access, or, it isn't necessarily vindictive that they're not trying to do it. They might have just gotten overwhelmed by something in life and it slipped through, and having somebody have a second set of eyes on that gives your organization the opportunity to be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, I noticed we are way behind on our third deposits. Like, did we send out a payment reminder? Do you need help?
Do you have spreadsheets you can share for financial tracking?
I don't have spreadsheets. I have a badass database. I mean, I could probably come up with something or share something from the past. Most of our clubs at this point have started using our online reservation system, which allows the clubs and the treasurers and anybody to download Excel reports from that system.
Okay, and I just happen to absolutely love this next question because it's just one I would love an answer to. How do you get participants to read emails?
Sorry.
If anybody has that answer, tell me. I had a funny story this year, actually, and maybe it's something we all need to implement. You can like drop cookies into your dialogue, right? I happened to tell a trip that there were going to be snakes on the bus instead of snacks on the bus. And it cracked me up. I didn't even get it at first. I had no idea that the typo existed. And I started getting these emails that were like, I knew that there were snakes on planes, but I didn't know about the buses. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm so confused. And it turns out there was just a typo, but I'm like, oh my gosh, bravo to you 36 people that replied to me directly and commented on it, because it means you actually read the trip material. So maybe you can just drop a little hidden cookie in there that's like, you've made it this far, first person to text me the word snow powder gets a free cocktail upon arrival, or I don't know. And then if your membership realizes that there's fun little things in the trip information you're sending out, maybe they'll be more motivated to read the information.
Then somebody commented that YouTube videos are good ways to share where you are going. Then there were compliments. This was very interesting. Presented many things. Do any other club? Okay, we did that one. If it's a bus trip, do you recommend the bus pricing to be less than the actual amount of people on the bus?
Yeah, we did that one. And we talked about if you padded, if your bus price, instead of basing it on 32, if you do
Okay.
it, on 28 and you end up at 32, then you've got a little bit of a slush fund there.
Okay, I thought we had that one. This one, I think we've talked about some too. Have you seen marketing in the meetup? Webster has brought in attendees, positive and negative on this marketing utilization.
I don't know what that's referring to. Like meetup groups?
Yeah, well, the meetup, the online social media meetup.
Yeah, I feel like that's more of a club. I have no idea where people are coming from once they get to me, but I think clubs can maybe share about their success utilizing that platform.
I know Texas Ski Council has kind of started an active meetup campaign, and I believe it's benefited. I believe Dallas Ski Club has used it, and I think Lone Star has benefited, and maybe a couple of the other clubs. So I do know some people are using it. Okay. How do I find out more info on MTS? Can clubs go? The answer is yes, clubs can go. There's a list of requirements. I would suggest you go to the Mountain Travel Symposium website and look at it, or reach out to Mary Manning.
There's contact information on there also. Yeah, so you can kind of check it out. And then Mary's contact information is on there, and she's the club liaison. So she can answer questions. She can give you more information about like the criteria and details on that.
All right,
Okay.
I'm gonna pop in with some.
Go ahead.
I got, one comment was that they have Wild Apricot club management software that they use for all the registration and contact info.
Wild Apricot, Club Express, We Travel, those are all some platforms that are available to clubs to utilize for registration, for communication, for club tracking purposes.
Yep. This person stated that they offer a discount for full payment within 30 days of opening the trip, and that eliminates a lot of follow-up for payment.
And so that's a good comment. I have a handful of clubs that do that actually. And, you know, secrets out of like, we offer a discount for full payment. All you do, you just increase your trip by $30 or $50 or whatever. And then as long as people pay, you know, in full in the beginning, then they get the discounted price. That's if the club doesn't want to like suck up the difference, you know, but you guys have all your own budgets to figure out where you want to spend money to incentivize people to do that.
Any ideas for group dinners and gatherings within budget? Things are getting tough these days.
It is. Again, dramatically varies based on destination. I think reminding travelers and just keeping it in your mind that the value is still there, right? Like you cringe when you go to try to organize a group dinner. Okay, first, be cognizant of venue fees. I want to encourage you not to pay for places that are not to pick places that are charging you, whether it's $500 or $3,500 just to be in the room, right? Use your tour operators and your local resources, your tourism offices to explore venues that when you pay them money, it's for something. It's not just to use the room. It's for drinks, it's for food. If there's a food and beverage minimum to use the space, that's going to be different than a venue fee. So food and beverage minimums are okay, because that basically means, okay, instead of a venue fee of $3,000, if your food and beverage minimum is $3,000, then you can just split that across your travelers and go, okay, well, then I'm going to have a badass dinner because we're going to spend $100 per person on apps and food and drinks and dessert. And you're getting something for your money and you're fulfilling their contract to use the space. So looking really at where you're going, and don't get suckered into just using this conference space because you feel like it's the only option. There are resources that your tour operators know, that your local area, the tourism office, the Chamber of Commerce, there's resources to kind of explore other options.
All right. Any suggestions on how to meet expectations for first-time traveler?
Ask them what their expectations are. Is there anything that you're worried about, anxious about, excited about before they even get on the trip? That's a good question for, you know, if you're having pre-trip meetings or pre-trip Zooms. Ask everybody, you know, like if there's any questions, concerns, excitement that you're particularly like interested in here, let's talk about it now so that you know, okay, this person's hell-bent on getting to Yellowstone, so I better figure out how we can get them out to Yellowstone, or whatever the case is.
All right, we got a club that uses Rained Out as a one-way text message system.
All right.
Cheryl, if you have some, you can pop in between me.
I have some too. I had a resorts offering fam trips. It's a good idea to help trip leaders become familiar with the area. I've seen fewer and fewer fam trips. The resorts are less motivated. Fam trips use it. So there's fam trips and there's site inspections. Fam trips are typically before you pick a destination. A fam trip is to woo you to that destination so that you do pick it as your trip destination. There's less and less of those because many of these places have the business. They're not trying to woo people. They're pretty good at fulfilling their blocks. I know Whitefish hosts trip leader fams every year. If you haven't been there in like the last 4 years, I think, or something, then you can qualify. There's a couple other destinations that are open to it. I know we as Sports America used to run 3 or 4 fam trips a year pre-COVID, and since that haven't really gotten back to it just because we have a harder time convincing the resorts that it makes sense. On the flip side, site inspections, just ask for them. Like, I am the queen of ask. You know, if you don't ask, then the answer is no. And if you ask, if you're like, I've never been to Schweitzer and I'm a little bit nervous about getting this all set up and the logistics of this, you know, you're telling me I got to get on a different bus when I get to the grocery store, and like, how long is this drive from the bus stop to the resort, and is there really enough stuff for my people to do there, and like, how do I do dinners, and questions like that? Just ask, because it is easier for us as tour operators to go to those resorts and say, look, like, they've sold out their trip. They've got 44 people that are coming to stay with you. Can we squeeze them in for a night or two to get familiar with the property, to get the lay of the land, to build some extra excitement? And I've had the ability to get people out on site inspections in the past couple of years, way easier than convincing a resort to do a fam trip. So just ask. I mean, there'll be several that are like, no, here's some online resources, but you're never going to know if you don't ask.
I don't see that I have any additional questions.
Okay.
All right.
If anybody still has some questions.
I
or
have a
comments-
couple more
have
that are
some.
still on my list. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, we haven't taken an overseas trip before, but are thinking about it. Do you have any suggestions for trip leaders on preparing this?
I am not an international expert by any means. We just kind of started dabbling in international options through Club Med, which I'm going to throw out there as a fantastic place to start for international destinations if it's not something you've done before. They're a trusted source. They do a great job of keeping everybody happy. They've got the contacts, they know the transfers, you know, it's all under one umbrella, which is a really cookie cutter place to start if you're looking for the beginning. And I don't, beyond that, I'm not going to comment on it because it's totally not my bag.
I got it. How do you survey?
There's lots of survey options. Some of your website platforms have survey options. Google is a great resource. That's if we start talking about like shared document options, utilizing a Google-based email address for your club, then also has the opportunity to have your Google Drive that's sharing all your club documents. You can set up Google polls, you can set up Google surveys. There's other resources like SurveyMonkey that are available. Cheryl, Lisa, do you have any others off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Those are my go-tos.
They're that I would say are probably the go-tos. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you stop WhatsApp participants from trying to run the trip or being negative?
I don't really have a great answer on that. Kill them with kindness. As my mom's always her go-to is like, get rid of the negative Nancy's by just keeping it positive, spinning it around on them. You know, they're frustrated that the lobby closes too early, and be like, well, that's okay. Like, what can I do in the morning to make sure that you have what you need ahead of time? Or I know the bus situation's really tough and it's not on schedule as much as we'd like, but I found that Uber's really available in this town. Have you tried that as an opportunity? Like, just trying to stay on top of it and combat the negativity with positivity, showing that you are in control and that you do have a handle on things.
And this is the clarification on the United penalties. If you had 32 seats and only gave 28 names, you would be charged $50 for 4 seats, or just 50 for the 1 seat over the 10% drop.
On United, you would only be charged $50 once. You don't get charged for the first 3. Just if it was Southwest, you'd get charged for all 4. So I have a couple more here. There's one says, we've been getting several new members from posting our social and ski events on Meetup. So there's some good feedback about Meetup. And sharing your experience. That's a really good comment. So don't just build up events on social media, but post them. Give a little FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Throw it all out there and be like, this is what an amazing time we had. You know, you missed out. Make sure you participate next time. When planning future year resort destinations, what are some resorts that seem to require further out date? Big Sky seems to be one recently. Which other resorts are late to get prices? So your 2 big early destination plans are going to be Snowmass, and if you want to stay at Top of the Village or Stonebridge Inn, those 2, and even Crestwood has gotten pretty high demand. Those ones are really early. Big Sky is really early, but we've kind of seen that shift down a little bit for 2025. I think that Big Sky's pricing is increased enough that there's less demand for it. So we were still able to get some Big Sky groups booked for 2025 just in the past month or so. So I think that's kind of pulled back a little bit, but Snowmass is still certainly very early planning. Some of them that are way late out. Snake Dance at Taos, they've got kind of a funny program where they'll do like a first right of refusal and hold your space, but they won't necessarily have actual pricing for you until pretty late in the game. And I'm working with them to try and change that program a little bit and get a better idea of what's going on there. But this past year, that was kind of a hurdle. And then a lot of the properties in Steamboat have been really hard to get rates for. There's kind of, unless you're staying at the hotels at Gravity House or Ptarmigan, or no, Gravity House, the Grand. And then now there's a new Hampton Inn. It's a Residence Marriott property that's doing some group stuff. Unless you're staying there, you really are reliant upon 2 different property managers. One of them is Facasa, and they're still requiring at least 10 units be booked to qualify for group rates. And that's just bonkers. Like, not many groups are really fulfilling 40+ people on a trip at this point. So there's some pretty big risk in that. And then the other one is, I mean, this year it was mid-April before we got rates from them. So that was really, really tough. Those are kind of the 2 extremes. Everything else, I feel like more of the hurdle is not that they don't have rates. It's just getting the rates turned over to us. So gone are the days where we used to have a rate sheet where in, you know, whatever timeline it was, the property would be like, hey, here's the pricing, go ahead and sell it. Just check with me on availability. Now the tour operators, we all have to go out, and every single time you ask us for a new option, a new date, a new destination, a new, like, it's starting at square one every time. And so then we have to get the attention of the property manager. We have to get them to respond with rates and availability, and then get that turned over to you. So the process of the timeline of it has just gotten tough. And there's some resorts that are much more responsive than others. And so that's kind of the other hurdle, is not necessarily that they don't have them ready, just are they responsive when you ask for a quote? How are clubs doing joint trips with other clubs, and how do you set something like that up? That really depends on the destination and on your relationship with that other club. What works best is if one club is the sole contractor, right? Like, you might have a sister club, but you 2 have an agreement that says, okay, collectively, we're both going to market and sell this so that we can achieve that 24-person goal. Trying to split a contract between a property, you know, saying to this property, these 2 clubs are coming, we're going to split this. They don't really want to have anything to do with that. And then it's harder for us too, because there's still the contract minimums, right? Like I might be splitting it 12 and 12, but if one of you falls short, you know, the other one's still on the hook. So it all boils down to that communication factor again. And just addressing that from the beginning while you're looking at a proposal or looking at a contract. Be honest about it from the get-go. It says, look, you know, it's not just me. Our sister club's gonna jump in here to do this, and we're all gonna sell into this. Do you see more groups doing a la carte trips where the club only handles the lodging and then the members provide their own transportation, lift access, etc.? Yes, and I think that the season passes was the first change to that, is that most clubs I see now market their trips without lift access included. So they're not including an adult 5-day ticket anymore because so many people have past products or so many people qualify for the senior level versus the adult level, that being able to market that price at a cheaper number, and then people add on what they need has been beneficial. And then compounding onto that is your airfare situation, where group airfare has gotten less and less valuable. It's not always the best deal. And sometimes there's hurdles that people don't like and are frustrated about, so they would prefer to do their own flight so they can get their upgrades, so they can get their premier access, so they can get their free bags. And some of those components aren't necessarily available within group travel. So instead of trying for the group air and not hitting that minimum and putting the club at risk, you know, it's not a terrible option to just say, hey, we're doing this as a land only. And I saw a few different clubs last year try that with some pretty good success, and said, look, here's the deal. If you want this transportation component, you have to land by 1 p.m. and you cannot book your flight earlier than noon. And if you qualify for that, then you get the transportation. And if you don't, then you've got to arrange your own situation. Good luck. So there, I've seen more and more and more of it. Absolutely. Use shared docs with payment and cutoff dates for trips. I think that's a comment. Yes, definitely do it.
I've got a comment similar. They use 2 WhatsApp chats, one for pictures and one for information people need to know and actually read.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Someone asked if they could get a soft copy of our presentation. We will definitely be emailing out to everyone who had an invite. Will be getting a copy of the recorded presentation. By soft copy, I'm assuming you mean a transcribed copy, and we won't be doing that.
But
if anybody wants to volunteer to transcribe it, we'd be happy to let you.
And I will send a copy of the PowerPoint. So it does have like the bullet points that we went through. It just doesn't have all my rambling dialogue to go with it.
Sarah, I don't know that you have any idea on this, but it's international group air causes many participants to know what seat they will have on an airplane. How deal with this when tour operator does not provide assigned seats?
It's not the tour operator that doesn't necessarily provide the assigned seats. Seat assignments change dramatically all the time. I don't know if that's different with international travel. But I know even for us domestic travel, like every time even if they just change the flight number, the entire seat manifest gets changed and the block of seats gets changed. So we tend not to try to share the seat map because of that, and because it opens up a can of worms that we don't really have any control over, because we don't have control over assigning the seats anymore. It's at the mercy of the airlines. Even just 10 years ago, we had the ability to go into our booking systems and actually assign specific seats in group travel. And that's not a platform that exists anymore. So it's tough. I had a comment here about how do you get people to read? They said, tell them you've set up a read receipt to the email. So, and then set up a read receipt on your email. So when you're sending out email information at least that will tell you who's opened it or not opened it. And then follow up to that was use MailChimp, and you can see who opens the email and then resend to a targeted audience for those who didn't open the emails or follow up with them. Personal calls to participants works really well, but takes time. You need to get to know your participants.
This comment says, we get our trip participants to volunteer to organize small groups for dinner rather than trying to find a place for 30 people.
This says the group leaders Facebook page is an awesome place to network and do a happy hour, or an awesome place, or awesome to network places to do happy hours. So that's something, if you guys aren't familiar with that, it is monitored by a couple trip leaders, and it's trip leader access only. So you don't have resort people in there. You don't have tour operators in there. It's an open forum for you guys to have conversations about what works best for you. Ideas for getting participants to understand that things have changed since COVID, such as always having a breakfast at the hotels, as sometimes when you book, there is a restaurant, but getting there, the restaurant is no longer open. That kind of goes back to the setting expectations in your pre-trip communication. You know, just making sure everybody is aware that, like, we don't get a deal on breakfast. It was going to cost everybody, you know, $140 to include breakfast. So instead, you have the opportunity to choose what days you want breakfast or not want breakfast. So instead of increasing your trip price, you have the flexibility to do what you want. Same goes for, you know, on mountain lunches, the amenities of a hotel. I think it's important in your communication to your members. Your group amenities are not always the same as individual amenities. There's a lot of hotels that will have the group breakfast or will have airport transfers included, but that's not included for group bookings. Getting their points. If it's a Marriott hotel, they expect to have their Marriott points, but because it's a group contract, it's not applied to each individual reservation. So just setting those expectations and making sure they're aware of them before they show up on site is helpful.
Overseas Adventure Travel does a great job for international travel.
I said, what are the top 3 US ski resort that clubs are planning for next year based on my experience? I think without looking at my trip board, off the top of my head, I think the 2 most popular destinations for 2025 out of the 100-ish trips we have arranged are Telluride and Big White. Big White was a surprise factor for us. Every time we turn around, I've got another club that's like asking for Big White, which is exciting. It's a fun destination, and it's neat to see somebody new out there. It's not just your Snowmass Steamboat Big Skies. But Telluride was a big one for next year. I think I've got somebody in-house almost every week.
How many clubs take credit card payments for their trips, and how do they handle the fees?
I can't answer to how many take it. Of the clubs, about 70% of the clubs, we'll just do numbers. So if I have 100 trips, 70% of the clubs that are booked will use our online reservation system. Of those, every single one of them allows guests to pay with a credit card. And our system does charge a 3% transaction fee, but it's noted in there from the very beginning, and it just designates like, this is the cash price, and this is how much you'll pay extra if you choose to pay by credit card. I have a lot of clubs that actually build the credit card fees into it, or like accommodate that in their trip pricing, and they require everybody to pay by credit card. They don't even offer the option for checks anymore. It's just sign up for the trip, pay for it, and it It's buried into it. So they're not seeing that line item of it's an extra $70 because we're utilizing a credit card. It's just part of the trip package. I think that that's made a lot of trip leaders' lives a lot easier trying to track down money. The ease of payment. I know a lot of people have a really hard time because they don't even have checkbooks anymore, right? So they have to do the bill pay apps to try to get their bank to pay those payments for them. And as you know, something I encourage trip leaders to point out or clubs to point out is like, if you aren't getting at least 3% back in some sort of perks from your credit card, you should be finding a different credit card. There's, you know, a lot of credit card options out there that offer some really great travel perks, some really great kickback, you know, points perks that if you're not basically paying off that in your credit card, maybe reevaluate what credit card you're using. Not to sound obnoxious, but there's just lots of options.
When you do a survey about where to go, how do you deal with people who answer but have no intention of going, even if it's the area they said is picked?
Can you read that one again?
It's basically what do you do about people that answer surveys or basically vote for destinations and have no intents of going?
I mean, if it's not a blind survey and as your leadership, you know that that's a repeat offender, you just have to take it with a grain of salt and not hold too much merit to it.
Or ask them to leave it blank, I guess. I know when I ask my club, I always say, if you have no intent of going, don't even raise your hand. This group creates a Google photo album so participants can upload photos directly and link them to the website, their club website. That's good.
Somebody says you can have an admin on the WhatsApp group, make it for just one-way communication for announcements. Cause I know a lot of people get frustrated with the back and forth and then the side comments. So that's a good option there. This one, as a tour operator, what do you recommend that clubs do as far as how many tour operators should be asked for a bid? What frustrates you about how clubs handle their bids as far as how many tour operators are asked to bid? How many is too many? I see nothing wrong with asking for bids if you're serious about exploring other options. Like I'm open to the competition. When it comes down to it, I would say though, it's the service level that's going to make a difference, because at the end of the day, the main tour operators in the industry at this point, we're all getting the same pricing. Like it's going to be pretty dang close across the board. You know, I have $20 to $100 difference depending on your destination, depending on what kind of apples to apples comparisons you're making. They might throw in some extra perks or something, but if you're working with somebody and you're happy with them, I don't know that it's necessary to solicit other bids just to check numbers. You know, maybe every few years, double check and just make sure you're not off the mark. But you know, and in that same breath, if you're serious about exploring partnerships with multiple people, and we work with a lot of clubs that they run multiple trips a year and they run it with 2 or 3 different tour operators. I might run one trip and Marcy is running one trip and Mike Agnew is running another trip, and that's all fine. Like we're not one tour operator can do it all. So we certainly I'm not going to say I'm not going to speak for them. I'm certainly open to that bidding scenario. I think that sending out bids to 3, 4, 5 tour operators just to collect pricing is a waste of your time and my time. You know, there's no reason why you need to be considering that many different providers. And it makes the lodging properties question, because they ask us who the bids are for. And when they find out that it's, 4 different people have approached them for the same week for the same group, they're going, oh my God, I've had to answer this question now 4 or 5 times. Like, narrow it down here. When it comes to air, you know, if we're all competing for the same air, you're just shooting yourself in the foot because you're driving up your price and your options by sending it out to too many people.
Well, Sarah, it's 8:30. How many more questions you got?
3, I think.
All right.
What is the best way to keep people informed during a trip when you have a large group? We tried using WhatsApp, but some people use it to chat with friends and it bothers everyone else. I think we've kind of addressed this a few times. We're just probably catching up to this question. So there's some options about making it a one-way communication, utilizing condo contacts instead of everybody in the group. So I think those are 2 good options for that. All of my informational group emails for the Far West Dive trip include dive humor. They may not remember the info, but they remember the dive humor when they're talking about the trip. So that's fun. Keep it interesting. We do add the fee. Oh, somebody's just saying they add the cost of the credit card fee to the trip cost. What was your other top 3rd trip on your list? Telluride, Big White, and I didn't say a 3rd. Got a few Schweitzers next year. We've got a Whitefish. We've got a lot of Whitefish Montanas next year. Do clubs accept payments by Venmo? I believe so, probably. I don't know that for certainty. I don't think that there are any tour operators that accept via Venmo, but I could be wrong. Do all tour operators have access to the same properties, or do they all have different lodging relationships for bids? I think that there's a little bit of fluctuation in that. You know, there's certainly access to all the same properties, but different tour operators have built and fostered relationships better with some destinations and other destinations. So you might have people that include things that another tour operator wouldn't. But know that at least when you're asking me, if I give you a bid and I don't include a property that you have a quote from somebody else on, and you're like, hey, I kind of like that property. I'm interested in this and I'm interested in working with you, but you didn't give me this option. You know, our whole shtick is we pride ourselves on custom trips. So just like asking for a site inspection, just ask for that. Say, hey, do you work with this property also? Because I'd love to see some pricing for that one as well. And, you know, the tour operator will either say, no, I don't really have a relationship with them and I'm not interested in giving you a price. Or they'll be like, absolutely, let me get you a price for that. So that's the end of my list here.
Okay. I've got a couple, few comments. Credit card fees and add-on charges can be tricky when you're in a state like California with established seller or travel laws. Someone said that they have on their survey, they usually ask them if they're going on a trip at the start of the survey, and they usually don't blindly follow the survey results because oftentimes only a few or about a third answer. And my club only accepts payments via cards. Card fees are into pricing with no complaints. And I think I had one question about what was the chat group between trip leaders called, and it is ski trip leaders.
And I
had
had
a question.
I don't think anybody's, somebody said, do you know about Apex Ski Area in British Columbia, Canada?
Apex,
APEX ski area in British Columbia, Canada.
I do not.
What lodging do you recommend for Sun Valley?
Sun Valley, we have 3 different partners we work with. We've got the resort. So you have your Sun Valley Lodge, Sun Valley Inn, Deluxe Lodge Apartments. That's a great option with lots right there in the base. The Limelight Hotel is right in downtown, and they're fantastic. They have a great group team in-house. They do a nice little welcome reception that's very accessible to town. And then we just started working with another partner, Hey Max. They were at MTS. We haven't sent anybody there, but we just started a relationship with them.
All right. With that, we're gonna call it a night.
Do you want, I have one more that I feel like
Okay.
can have one answer here. So it said, what 3 major resort lodging options do you feel give the best deals to ski clubs? Obviously, this will depend on the details, but is there something that you can be found for the best value? So I will chime in on this because I think there's a couple places that do, they still do a great job with groups and maximizing groups. So Mammoth Mountain, giving them a little plug, they do great. They still offer a group breakfast. You get breakfast burritos, the resort ambassadors come, you get like a 2.5-hour mountain tour for all ability levels. And the past couple of years, they still offer $100 resort credit voucher for anybody on the trip, everybody on the trip, that can be used for lodging, dining, rentals, activities, which is great. It's really fun to see resorts still care about groups. So that's probably top of my list as far as like good group promo stuff. The Mountain Lodge at Telluride and Telluride Ski Resort, they do a phenomenal job holding the hands for groups as well. There's a lot of group options. So those are my top 2. We're gonna wrap it up.
All right, folks, it is, I mean, we've been on an hour and talking for an hour and almost 10 minutes. And we've got 120 people still, 27 people still on. Thank you to each and every one of you. I hope you learned a little something, got something out of it, and it was beneficial. This is what we're trying to do as the Federation and the education program, is to provide stuff that you want to know about. So please share any ideas with Cheryl, myself, any board member, if you have suggestions for other types of topics. They do not have to be just on trips. They can be about anything. Trips is just always a biggie for everyone. I wanted to say thank you. And we did got up. My goal was 100 and we got up to 173. So y'all were awesome. Big thank you to Sara. Appreciate her time.
Thank
And
you all
thanks-
for attending.
And thanks to Lisa, the education chair. She's really instrumental in helping get these going. And Sarah's been fantastic. She did one of these for us last year, and this one just can't thank enough. And any of you guys who have questions about the Federation, please do reach out, and please do encourage your council representatives to attend our meeting. This year's meeting is in August the 22nd to 25th, I believe, and it is in Taos, being hosted by Taos Ski Valley, with Snake Dance also assisting with transportation. And those of y'all that know Roger, he's hosting a dinner at his home. So please do encourage your councils to attend. And if you have any questions, reach out to us. And a huge thanks to Lisa and Sarah. Thank you guys very much. And thank y'all for attending. Really appreciate it.